Holland Gold, Mining Adventures. Welcome back. I'm here with my friend Bob, and we're going to talk a little bit today about fine gold and understanding fine gold. Here in our region, we do have nuggets, by the way, and we don't want to discard those to get the fine gold. We don't want to just classify everything into the tailing dump. We want to have a shot at getting the nuggets, but most of our gold is fine gold, and so we're going to focus on that because that's a guaranteed payday per se. We know we're going to get the fine gold, and the nuggets can be a bonus. So what is fine gold, by the way? It's defined differently in different regions. The smaller gold in California, concentrations of the smaller gold are actually much larger typically than the fine gold that we have here. They talk about flower-sized gold, and when I've mined in California, it's like, this is a pretty coarse fine gold. Our fine gold is exactly that. A lot of it is the size of a grain of flour or a fly speck. It does add up. You don't want to lose the fine gold to get the coarser gold. And so how do you do that? Obviously, flow rate is important. The angle of your sluice is important. But the most important thing of all, in my opinion, is particle equivalency. And in a nutshell, you have to get the bigger material away from the fine gold, or the bigger material causes deflection in the sluice box, upsets the flow, and it'll cause the fine gold to move from the riffle. It'll go 2 or 3 or 1 riffle before it settles down again, and if another rock lands there briefly, it moves it again, and your fine gold will end up walking its way out. So in our case with the gold maker, for example, we classify the largest material as washes and exits, and then the likely size material that might contain a gold nugget, which would be from 3/4 minus to 1/4. It loads clear at the bottom of the system, so it's out of play for the fine gold. But you will, if it's there, you're going to find the nugget way down there. You're not going to lose your nuggets by just putting in the tailing dump. But the most important part is 1/4 inch minus material goes through the recovery drawers. And so you have the smaller 1/4 inch material competing with this very, very fine gold, and that's doable. That's actually ideal for catching your fine gold. That's why we built what we built. Whether it's our system or whoever it is, you have to get the bigger material away from the fine gold to catch.
So, Mark, can I ask you a question? You kind of talk about how to properly classify material.
That is how you classify properly the material. Other equipment, for example, the Gold Cube is a great product. It does a great job of getting this very, very fine gold. But for the Gold Cube to work, you have to classify all the material down to the smaller, I'm not sure what they recommend, but I'm sure it's less than 1/4 inch, and then run it through the Gold Cube. You don't just shovel into a Gold Cube. It is a concentrator. It does a great job of material that's already been concentrated. In our case, I wanted to build something that you could shovel into, and it would just be one and done.
So let me ask you this. So you're talking about classification, which is properly classified. You get particle equivalency. So you have gold competing on that same playing field. Like when I bought my first high banker, shovel into the hopper and would roll out the bigger stuff, but the grizzlies would literally drop probably 3/4 material right on the sluice box with everything. So if I understand you correctly, that's kind of the big difference. You're really getting rid of that 3/4 and 1/2 inch and then 1/2 inch to 1/4 and then letting the 1/4. Is that correct?
I know the gold that you were mining at the time, that Florence gold in the Black Sand Creek, very fine gold.
Yes.
And possibly 2 sluice boxes might have been a good setup for you. Mine the coarser stuff through 1, or dump it at the bottom like our little machine does. But to have it right in your sluice box, you're going to lose some of your fine gold.
What I found, Mark, and I think the Florence gold is a great example because number one, it's only about 80% pure gold. While I know on salmon, it's 90 plus pure gold. So it's obviously its specific gravity is going to be different. I love slick plates because that's to me is part of the classification, allows the gold to settle into the bed load or the lower in the slurry before it hits. But as long as it's not competing with 3/4 inch or even a 1/2 inch rock, well, that to me that's a win. Let me ask you this though: what about feed rates in any high banker? I don't care if it's a horizontal or a vertical high banker. Is that important too?
That's important at every level, whether it's a creek sluice, a high banker, your dredge, or an operation like you see on Gold Rush. You have to feed it appropriate to your water flow. What I mean by that is in order for a riffle, whatever riffle design you have, in order for it to work, you have to see the top of the riffle always. Anytime you bury in the riffle, then you have a slurry of material that's just sliding out. It might as well be a slick plate, Bob. If you want to really, yeah, overload your machine, and now you just have one big slick plate. And we all know how much gold a slick plate catches. It doesn't catch any gold. So you have to have the top of the riffle always exposed. That gives a place for the gold to trip. And then it does its thing. It's active in the riffle. It works its way down. It pushes out other heavies, black sands and what have you, and moves it on, concentrating the gold. So yeah, I forgot what your question was. You don't want your sluice box to work like a slick plate. That's too much. The feed rate.
Feed rate, the water flow, also obviously sluice angle all come into play when you're doing that. But to answer your earlier question, was up in Florence running mine. I had, I think, a total of 12 feet of sluice. But when I actually did my testing, I'm like, how much gold am I losing out of the first 5 feet? I found out that that extra 7 feet was worthless. So I took it off because all my gold, after it hit it was 2 feet of slick plate followed by 3 feet of expanded metal. I wasn't losing anything. But the key point is I knew the size of gold, so I designed the trommel that only 1/4 inch minus was going through the screening and everything else around there because I knew there's no nuggets in there. It was all fine gold. And I think your point is really important is, as we talked about in the previous video of your expectations, it's understanding the gold you're going for. If you're in California, it's one thing. If you're in Arizona, it's something else. If you're in Nevada, it's again something else. Idaho and the Salmon River. So that all comes into play as the equipment you're going to pick, right? And then making sure you also understanding how much is it? Salmon River 92, 95% pure, or is it?
I sold gold that was 95% pure, and my gold buyer told me that it was the purest raw gold that he'd ever bought.
Wow. Okay. I want some of that, Mark.
We'll get it. You, by the way, hit on something I was going to mention, and there's several regions that produce gold that is 72% gold and a high concentration of silver, and then obviously tin they call it, which is miscellaneous other. But that it's fine also on top of that, so it's even harder to catch because it's less dense than our Salmon River gold down here. Just one more obstacle to overcome, and one more reason that you've got to have the proper flow. You've got to have particle equivalency, and obviously the right amount of water and the slope, and all these play into the fine gold recovery. Let's talk about equipment. We going mining with a gold pan, Bob?
Well, to me, I learned a long time ago it is great for prospecting, testing an area, but it sounds simple, but you need to learn how to pan. It's also good for finishing, but again, that takes time. And then we got a creek sluice that has its place, especially if you're packing into some place or
very inexpensive, very low investment,
easy to do. Then of course the next higher up is a high banker, and then obviously there's the traditional horizontal high banker that there are a lot of good ones out there. A lot of I know Keen makes one. A Gold Hog makes one, and there's other manufacturers, and then they have their pluses and minuses like any equipment. And then you have a vertical high banker, which is my preference, is just because it's smaller, it's compact, it's lightweight, and it offers more classification than a traditional one. Let's see, after that, of course, then you get into your trommels, and the Indian dredges. But for us if it was me getting back into this, I would get back into just using a high banker.
That's the question. You don't to think you're going to buy a gold pan and you're going to go be real profitable with it. You just need to understand that each piece of equipment has its place. Gold pan is invaluable. I guess that's a word. It's very valuable. Everybody has a gold pan. You need a gold pan. You need a gold pan to test and again to clean up your larger concentrations. It's an easy thing to put in your backpack. You don't put a trommel in your backpack when you're out prospecting. You put a Army shovel and a gold pan. With a well set up 3 or 4 foot creek sluice, personally, I feel like I can do 20 times the material that I can do with my gold pan. And so if you do have a small concentration of gold, you can multiply what you can do with the pan many times with a small creek sluice. And it multiplies again with a high banker. and it multiplies again with a small dredge. And don't even get me started on the fact that a 5-inch dredge does double what a 4-inch dredge, and how and why that works. And a 6-inch dredge will do double what a 5-inch dredge does. It's a multiple, and right on up the scale you go. So the point is, don't buy a shovel and a gold pan and think you're gonna go get rich. Buy a shovel and a gold pan and go find a discovery, and then determine which piece of equipment best suits what you're looking at.
Yeah, that's great advice, especially for all the new miners out there. As we've talked about, mining isn't easy. I think there's more failures than successes, but the failures actually, and I think I've told you in my career, I've learned more from my failures than from my successes. And that just builds on there. And this is just another example. But also you go back to the gold pan. Learn how to pan gold. It's not as easy as you think. As we both know, I can pan gold, but I can't pan it as well as you. It's just a fact. But I could shovel more dirt than you.
Both are important.
Exactly. So let's wrap this up, Mark. Next video, what are you thinking?
Well, we've got some pretty nice weather here. This has been a very mild winter for our banana belt region of Idaho. We get mild winters anyway, but this one's like scary mild. With the nice weather coming, I think my buddy Jeff and I are going to go out and do a little high baking. We're actually going to go back to where I found my boomerang with the very first time I ever shoveled into my prototype gold maker. And we're going to see if the gold's still there. We're going to go dig on that 2 or 3 foot packed gravel lager and see if we can show some fine gold, and if we're lucky, maybe even dig out another nugget.
Okay. So our next video is going to be, we'll call it Return to the Scene of the Crime.
Fair enough.
Okay, my friend. We'll see you soon.
Take care.
Okay, bye.